Hi everyone, and welcome to my table for this week's table talk. Our scripture comes from the Gospel of Mark, the 16th chapter. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him." And the part of the Apostles' Creed that we're looking at this week is, "He descended to the dead. On the third day, he rose again." I hope and pray that you were able to find God sitting with you this past week, and that you were able to bring the peaceful presence of God into the lives of those who are around you. This week, we turn to the good news that is the foundation of our faith. Jesus did not stay dead. Jesus rose from the dead. And not only did Jesus rise from the dead, but Jesus also conquered death. So with the Apostle Paul, we can say, "Where, O death, is thy victory? Where, O death, is thy sting?" That comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Not only does our God know our suffering and our grief and our pain, and not only does our God sit with us in all of those hard places, but our God also has victory over all the hard stuff and allows us to share in that victory. Friends, because of sin, life can be so very dark and hopeless and isolating at times. And in those dark times, it can be really hard to know and feel the presence of God with us. God can seem really far away, as though God has abandoned us. We can feel as if all of the weight and the burden of the sinfulness of this life is upon us, and that all of our suffering and pain and grief are ours alone to carry. Yet even when we feel this way, God is with us and offering for us to share in the victory of Jesus, who has conquered all of these things. And even when it seems like pain and grief will not end, God is leading us towards experiences of resurrection. You see, resurrection wasn't just this one-time event of Jesus rising from the dead. Resurrection is also something that we experience in our lives as we walk in faith and love. We experience resurrection firsthand when God brings us through times of darkness and grief. We experience resurrection when God leads us through suffering and trial. Resurrection doesn't just mean that I can laugh at the grave and look forward to the sweet by and by someday. Resurrection means that I get to experience the joy and the power of overcoming the grave here and now and walking victoriously with Christ. Let me share with you a really quick anecdote to help you see how you can turn to the victory of Jesus in a practical way here and now in your lives. One time in ministry, I lost a ministry partner over a misunderstanding, and it was a really hard loss. We had launched a new ministry together in our church, and it was something that we worked really closely on. So we had gotten to know one another, and we became friends in faith along with being ministry partners. But because of a misunderstanding that someone else had, this ministry partner had to resign from their position, and that resignation hurt. It came just as our newly launched ministry was starting to bloom. The people in the church were hurt. And not only was there a resignation, but this ministry partner completely withdrew from the church and myself with no further contact with anyone. It was like losing a really good friend to death. I knew I probably would never see this person again unless it was by chance. And I had an ache and a grief at the loss not only of the individual, but also of the combined and shared ministry that we had. I wondered if there was something that I could have done differently, but I knew that I had done everything right according to the knowledge that I had. I felt heartbroken for myself, for my ministry partner, for the person who had the misunderstanding, and for the church. I hit a really low point because I pushed aside my grief and loss in order to help the church through their grief and loss. And then ministry began to seem purposeless. Why be in ministry if loving others and doing everything you can to do right and be in ministry can still lead to a misunderstanding that causes ministry to crash and burn? I didn't know what to do. And the God that I knew had led us into ministry together seemed really far away. It took time, prayer, and wise counsel, but slowly I started to heal and the church started to heal. Then we hired somebody new for our staff position who was perfect for our congregation, and new ministry began to bloom with this new ministry partner. In hindsight, I was able to see and say that God had worked this misunderstanding out for the good of those who loved him. You can read that scripture in Romans. God works all things together for the good of those who love him. But even before we hired this new staff person, I experienced resurrection. When the hurt and the grief started to wane and the sky seemed once again clear and sunny, it felt like I was getting a new lease on life and on ministry. It was a rising out of grief and suffering and ache into a new day and a resurrection experience. Even if you might not feel it today, wait and watch for experiences of resurrection in your life. As we trust in Jesus, who descended to the dead and on the third day rose again, we can trust not only that there is life eternal, but also that there are resurrection experiences for us here and now. Look for those resurrection experiences, and I look forward to seeing you again around the table.